The movie opens in 1962, and we see a car stopping in front of an airport. There is a man named Lucio Urtubia and a woman sitting inside. Lucio comes out of the car with a bag and goes inside the airport. It appears that he was going to catch a flight out of the city. Then, the woman outside notices that her car is being observed by a policeman, and when she sees more policemen coming toward the airport, she realizes that something is wrong. So, she hurries inside and tells Lucio that there are police everywhere and they need to get out of there. Both try to escape, but they are chased by Inspector Costello's men. However, when they come to realize that they cannot escape, they create a distraction by taking the money out of the bag and tossing it into the air. This makes all the people inside tempted to get the money and they run toward it. After that, Lucio manages to outwit the authorities once again and escapes. The scene shifts back in time 20 years earlier to Casante, Navarra, and we see young Lucio getting shot at and chased after stealing supplies from a farmer's land to feed his family since his father is gravely ill and cannot work. At night, Lucio's father calls him to his bedroom and tells him that he is in pain. To save his father's life and ease his pain, young Lucio takes a knife with him and walks into a bank and begs the manager to lend him 5,000 peseta so he can buy morphine for his ill father. However, the bank turns Lucio down since he has no collateral and partly because his father was a Republican. The response infuriated Lucio, and he points the knife at him, but he couldn't hurt him and wets his pants. Then, he exits the bank with tears running down his cheeks. Upon his return, Lucio learns that his father has passed away. After the burial, when Lucio comes back, he sees that his sister Satter is packing her things and leaving for Paris to work as a maid. Lucio desperately wants to leave Casante and his miserable and pathetic life and begs his sister to take him to Paris. He tells her that if we stay here, we will remain poor and nothing will ever be good. However, Satter advises him to complete his military service and then meet her in Paris. After 10 years, we see Lucio all grown up in Paris. Lucio visits his sister Satter after completing his escape from a military prison for theft and impresses her with his stories of how he managed to smuggle supplies and tools out of the camp. Satter then tells him to go back and fix things, but Lucio says that he hates the military and he will never go back. Then, Satter's husband comes there, and she introduces him to Lucio. Lucio then asks him for a job in his company, but he tells Lucio that they only hire qualified specialists. However, Satter's husband put in a good word for Lucio, securing him a job at a construction site as a bricklayer. At the site, Lucio works very hard, making all the other workers jealous of him. So, they come to Lucio and tell him to slow down because he is making the others look bad. However, Lucio tells them to back off and let them do his job. Then, while working there, Lucio joins an anarchist association and is exposed to the lives of some of the country's most influential anarchists, which strengthens his hatred towards banks that constantly exploit their workers and cause inequality in the world. Lucio denies recognizing authority and wishes to fight against it, making him a true anarchist. He even beats up a couple of policemen, spitting in the face of the authority to celebrate his initiation. The rest of the group members from his anarchist association take him to learn French because they tell him that if you want to beat them, then you should at least speak their language. For his first mission, Lucio was asked to hide Quico Sabate, who was on the run after stealing $50,000 in cash from a bank in Barcelona, and the duo instantly clicked. At Lucio's place, they have dinner together and discuss things about the mission. Then, Quico shows him some weapons in his suitcase and tells him that he needs a place to hide them. Days later, Quico and Lucio plan to rob a bank together. They both sit together for tea and Lucio tells Quico that he is a bit nervous. To this, Quico says that everyone feels nervous when it's their first time. Then, Lucio tells him that it's not his first time, as he tried to rob his village bank once to help his dying father, but he couldn't do it. After hearing this, Quico tells him that they will rob the bank and they will walk out in honor of his father. Quico plans to use the money to support the movement and local anarchists and intends to help his friends in prison and their families. The duo walks inside the bank, and Quico fires several shots, ordering everyone to get down. Unlike his partner, Lucio was too terrified to react and instead peed himself, but he soon complied. The movie is set at a time when France was in turmoil. The rich were getting richer, and the poor were starving to death, deprived of food and shelter. And Lucio believed that the only way to get justice and equality was to quit chatting, stick flyers on the walls, and fight for their ideals. So, both rob the bank successfully and run. When they get home, Quico decides to celebrate by eating fried squid and onions, but Lucio tells him that they can't keep robbing like this. To this, Quico tells him to relax and stay calm during the robbery and everything will be fine. Then, they divide the money into 3 equal parts, and Quico says that the first part is for the movement and local anarchists. The second part is for their friends in prison and their families. And finally, the third part belonged to them. So, then they buy a car and a driver to help them in their work and continue the robberies. But Inspector Costello is already onto him and his group, putting his plans in peril. So, at night when Lucio and Quico were having a meeting with each other, the police raid their place and catch everyone in the house. Then, they make everyone read aloud a sentence so that the bank owner can recognize the voices of the robbers, and Costello finds Lucio suspicious. He searches his house for the cash but finds nothing. So, he releases him but warns him that he will keep an eye on him. Lucio, in some respects, is quite like Quico. He, too, wishes to rob banks that have been robbing working-class men like him for years and doesn't care if he's thrown into a jail cell or is riddled with bullets. Lucio and his friends were even denied loans they desperately needed to open their printing press, and his hatred skyrocketed when he learned of Quico's death. On the same night, Quico robs the bank, buys the printing press, and cuts ties with his organization, deciding to run things on his own. Then, he meets a girl named Anne who visits his printing shop, and she invites him to her rally in which she is trying to convince people to stand up for their rights. Lucio goes to her rally and sees some boys who were trying to harass her, so he shuts them off. After the rally, Anne comes to Lucio and thanks him, but Lucio says that it was just his responsibility. Then, the police come there and throw tear gas shells at people to make them evacuate the place. So, Anne and Lucio run out of there. Then, Anne asks him to introduce himself and Lucio tells him that he is a builder and he robs the banks to help the poor. They both share a similar mindset, so they get along very soon. Afterward, Lucio enlists Anne, an idealistic and intelligent French woman, in his anarchist group, and they soon fall in love. The duo also brings in Patrick, an expert forger, to have him fabricate and print American dollars. Then, they place a fake dollar and an original one on the table and try to find the difference, but they seem identical, so Lucio plans to exchange his fake dollars for francs to find out if his idea will work, and to his surprise, the bank lady exchanges his fake dollars. Then, Lucio gives the francs he got in exchange for the poor and supports his cause. He even met with the Cuban ambassador and tries to convince Fidel Castro to circulate the fake cash as a first step to ending capitalism. He tells her that if we are successful in circulating this fake money, then we can make the banks go to nothing. The ambassador then tells him that it's impossible, but she also tells him that in a few days she will be going to the Soviet Union and he will be passing by Paris. Lucio says that this will be perfect because he can take his assistants and tell him his plan. This is when the scenes shift back to where we started as Lucio goes inside Paris airport. He tells a lady his name and she takes him inside. There he sees the Cuban ambassador and she tells him that she is inside the bathroom, and he has only 5 minutes to meet him there and tell him all about his plan. She also tells him not to argue and just leave after he has shared his plan with him. Lucio goes inside the bathroom and finds a man. He quickly shows him his fake dollars and tells him the plan, but after listening to him, the man tells him that the banks of America are far too powerful and his idea won't work. After that, he leaves and Lucio comes out. Then, we see Anne who approaches Lucio and tells him that he has been ratted. Then, Costello catches Urtubia and puts him in prison. While Lucio spends his time in prison, Anne gives birth to a baby girl, and Lucio, after being granted a conditional release, tries to earn an honest living, learns about traveler's checks, and plans to print fake traveler's checks. He convinces everyone to get in on the plans and decides to rob the biggest bank in the city with his fake checks. However, they're having a hard time making a perfect copy but eventually succeed. Then, Lucio calls in his trustworthy associates and provides them with 20 fake checks to cash into the city bank at exactly 12 p.m. and labels it an anarchist milestone. The reason Lucio decides to hit the bank at the exact same time is to ensure the anarchists cash in as much as they can before the bank realizes the checks are fake. Lucio thinks that even if the headquarters had recognized them as fabrications, the anarchists would already have circulated the money. And this isn't just a one-off gig, Lucio plans to do this every other month. Meanwhile, the banks in the US are losing millions every week and send Mr. Barrow to oversee the investigation, and the latter joins forces with Costello to bring Lucio down. On the other hand, Lucio is hell-bent on crippling and bringing the banks to their knees and often ignores his wife's advice to lay low and earn an honest income, given that he's now a father and not a crook. Lucio is still in possession of 30,000 checks, summing up around $3 million in total, and plans to sell them all at once since the banks have interrupted their flow. Lucio senses it's time to strike the final blow and meets Tony Greco via a friend who's somewhat emphatic towards the Anarchists Association, partly because of his impression of the legendary Quico Sabe. Tony buys all the checks at 1/3 of their value on the market and agrees to pay Lucio $1 million. On the other hand, the police have constantly been tailing the group, so Patrick and others cut ties with Lucio, fearing they'd get caught and have to spend the rest of their days in jail, leaving Lucio to carry out his plan alone. However, on the day of the exchange, Lucio is apprehended along with Estriano, Petit Jean, and Tony. Estrillo and Petit were granted bail. However, Lucio's case was pushed to 20 years in prison plus $5 million in damages. The incident made headlines, and people recognized Lucio as a hero, and the newspaper labeled him Robin Hood. Once again, after getting out on bail, Lucio skipped his tail and managed to smuggle the fabricated checks into other nations like the Netherlands. But he was caught again after the cops traced his wife's call, but it doesn't matter now. Even though he's been caught, and the cops have obtained all the forged checks, they still don't have the plates they were printed on, enabling the anarchists to print the checks still and cash them in. But Lucio works out a deal and agrees to submit the plates in exchange for reasonable compensation and a ticket out of jail, and the bank reluctantly agrees to save their skin, and the movie concludes. It's ironic how a simple bricklayer incapacitated and brought the most powerful bank in the world to its knees and made them beg like he once did for a mere 5,000 francs to save his father's life. And that's all, guys. We hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.